Yeah, hi folks. Right now I'm testing out some new speakers, so please let me know if you have any problems at your end. Anyway, today I'm mainly going to cover He PuaPua, which by the way is Labour Party policy. But first I want to read a positive tweet by Judith Collins. Quote, "National will reverse any attempts the government makes to criminalise speech beyond the threshold of inciting violence." Unquote. Anyway, let's get started.
Back in 2010, the national government, alongside the Māori Party, signed up to the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The problem is a declaration plan never happened until now. Māori Party co-leader Peter Sharples pleased his punch in 2010.
I'm really happy, yeah.
Nowadays, national not so much.
This was a voluntary declaration with no requirement that we follow through on it.
Yeah, well, you shouldn't have followed John Key down this UN rabbit hole in the first place. But I am pleased you're finally waking up.
The controversial He PuaPua report advancing Māori rights under the United Nations, sparking separatism allegations from National. Now the government says, let's do this.
I don't think anyone has to be afraid. They shouldn't be afraid of the rubbish and nonsense that the opposition keep talking about.
The National Party that I lead will not be part of a co-governance of the country.
Good.
One News understands the government will consult with Māori first over the next few months, creating a declaration plan that'll then go to the wider public next year, top of the list for the New Zealand Māori Authority shared decision making.
It's about having equal say in how our lands are managed, our waterways.
You heard that, folks. Equal say, he said, from a group of radical part Maori who don't represent the majority of Maori. They make up less than 8% of New Zealand's population.
Well, let's do it here, right now. So,
Absolutely.
What does co-governance look like, Matthew? What is it that you're looking for?
Well, I mean, look, first of all, He PuaPua is not even government policy, so...
Liar.
I know I was supposed to get back to you sooner with a He PuaPua report, but I'm sure it's no surprise that as I started to dig, I ended up going down certain rabbit holes, and man, there's a lot of rabbit holes here, and I suppose there's no real surprise as to where they lead to. However, it's always good to make sure of your sources to make sure that it's going through what it needs to. So let's jump straight into He PuaPua, the report. Yeah, this. All right, yay. All right, cost me $5 to print off so I could read it. All right, so first and foremost, let's have a look. We've got a whole bunch of authors there. Claire Charters, Kayla Kingdon Beebe, Tamati Olsen, Waimiri Rangi Ormsby, Emily Owen, Judith Pryor, Jacinta Ruru, Naomi Solomon, and Gary Williams. Now, there's a couple of interesting parts in there. Firstly, almost all of them, and only because I don't know who Gary Williams is, I've been able to find information on everyone else except for Gary Williams. So all of those others are either fully or partially funded by the taxpayer. So they have been taking the money from the taxpayer for years and years and years, and I mean decades types of years. They've all been or are linked to Te Arawhiti. There's the government departments about Māori affairs, and also there's a couple of interesting parts here. Now, this particular one, I don't think that it's that important, but it deserves bringing up, which is Waimirirangi Ormsby. There's actually the old name also of Nanaia Mahuta's family member. I think it's her father used to be an Ormsby and then became a Mahuta. To be clear, I don't think that that's a massive thing, even if that is accurate, that she's linked. I'm not saying that there's a nepotism element going on there.
I think you're being a bit kind there, Elliot.
Either, just that it is something that of interest to me. But one big one that we find is that these guys are all academics, activists, very much heavily involved in the UN and in the policy writing aspect around things, very much into constitutional indigenous type law, te Tiritea Waitangi areas and policy making. So these guys are absolutely making their money. Their money comes from the ideas around te Tiritea Waitangi, the new style, ever since the 80s when they started to redefine certain words and change some of the translations. So that's a powerful part of this document, is that it is written by those who are hardened to the left, who are very strongly into the UN.
Yes, Jacinda Ardern's people, Labour Party policy.
I think we're starting in a conversation that has descended over, into madness over the course of the last few weeks. We're race baiting. This is a conversation, all the rest of it. For me, it's not about co-governance. It's about Māori aspiration.
Oh, it's about Maori aspiration, he says. It's got nothing to do with co-governance. Look over there. Wow. Really? And we're supposed to buy that? Anyway, I'll come back to him.
Does this concern you?
Absolutely.
Why?
He totally misrepresents what He PuaPua talks about. I mean, obviously we want Maori to participate in our country and our decision-making and so on, but 12 months back, and I don't know the data right now, the leader and deputy leader of National, leader and deputy leader of New Zealand First, deputy leader of Labour, co-leader of the Greens, and even the leader of the ACT Party were all Maori. Now, what's Matthew on about? Maori are participating fully in our decision-making.
Exactly.
No, Matthew, hold on a second. Matthew, you had your turn.
Let's agree on something to start with. Let's agree that we'll respect each other as we go through this.
Right.
So, Matthew, I'll just let him finish, and then we'll come to you, because just like Don did with you. Okay, Kapai.
Right. So we've got Maori participation extensively in decision-making now. What He PuaPua talks about is a situation where Maori have separate operations in healthcare, separate operations in justice, separate operations in education. We saw it yesterday.
Now, John, they do. We have Kohanga, we have Kurapapa Māori, we have Marae Justice, we have all sorts of things. We have Māori Health Authority beginning now. We have this now.
And we shouldn't. It has already gone too far.
And we're going further and further down that track, and I think that's dangerous for our future.
In what way?
Well, because we're making people choose between their Maori ancestors and their Pākehā ancestors. Every single person who identifies as Maori in this country also has Pākehā ancestors.
Yes, we're all the same, and we should all be treated equally.
We're forcing them to choose. And Matthew, you say you want more Maori electorates.
Choose an option. So what's the problem with that?
Well, let me respond to Matthew's point about Maori electorates. We don't need more Maori electorates. Half the Maori in the country are not on the Maori roll. Choose not to be identified as separate from other New Zealanders.
Yeah, exactly.
I would argue if they choose to be in the Māori role, then you get more Māori seats. As simple as that. It's always been
that's true. That's always been the case.
Matthew?
Don, your views of the 1950s.
No, they're not. They're far more recent than that. Race relations were better just 20 years ago.
You would like to take us back to a place where you and the people that you represent would like us to be. The fact of the matter is we need to look at the future. And the future is okay with brown people being able to have ideas, Don.
They don't have ideas now?
You know, you're using that word separate. Māori are not using the word separate. We're not the ones using the word apartheid as somehow we invented that system to separate us from Pākehā. I'm very proud of my Irish ancestry. I mean, I'm an O'Flaherty. Half of me's Māori, half of me's Irish. I'm very proud of that. But
so why are you treating people separately? It's because you want to line your pocket. Anyway, now to some interesting people on Peter Williams' podcast.
Mark in Cambridge. Good morning.
Good morning, Peter. I think that anybody that was involved in the penning of He PuaPua, anybody that supports He PuaPua, is fundamentally a racist. They're critical race theorists. They basically believe that the state must actively discriminate, right, against racial groups that they deem are privileged, meaning whites and usually and a lot of Asians. Critical race theory people support racial quotas race-based benefits, and race-based redistribution of wealth. They are such a threat to the fundamental fabric of the way that we have lived in this country for hundreds of years now.
Exactly.
Not just since the signing of the documents, but for a very long time. New Zealanders were observed by a French academic that came here many years ago, over 100 years ago. And he said, there's one thing that New Zealanders do not do. We do not do theory. We do practicality. We are very into what, if this cog works here and drives that, that drives that. Very practical people, very humble people, actually. And I don't think we need to have this foisted upon us by a bunch of academic fools. And I don't know if it's academics or whatever goes on inside these institutions, but I had the opportunity a couple of weeks ago to delve into the Royal Society and see where some of this information was being sort of genesised. All I ask people to do is just look up Dr. Margaret Mutu and have a read of one of her submissions from 2015, which backgrounds so much of this, and you just see the hatred pouring out of from the pen. These people hate the situation that they observe amongst their own ethnic group. That's fine, but it's got. If you want to look at it that way, that's your problem. If you look around, you see just your ethnic group, just the people who you identify with, rather than the rest of us just trying to get on together. I think it's very dangerous. It's very short-sighted. It's very communist. It's rooted in Marxism, and it's just got no place here in New Zealand.
Magic talk. Daryl in Oamaru, good morning.
Good morning, Peter. Yeah, hear me all right?
I can hear you fine, sir. What are you thinking?
Yeah, hey, look, just about this He PuaPua thing, I actually totally agree with that last guy. I'm actually married myself, and I can see right through this. It's actually all divisive, and it's been specifically orchestrated and designed to get the exact desired and outcome that that this minority group, and they're only a minority group, Peter. That's all they are. They don't represent me. They do not represent a huge majority of the Maoris throughout this country. It's divisive, and as I say, and it's also been given the green light by who? It would have to be by the leader.
Well, of course, if Jackson is going to make a statement this afternoon, and in the absence of him saying the whole report's being chucked in the rubbish tin, then of course it will have been approved by Jacinda Ardern, Grant.
Of course it has.
Yeah,
Robertson,
of course it would have been.
and the senior members of the cabinet, absolutely endorsed by them.
Yeah,
and it shows again the influence of this very strong Māori caucus inside the Labour caucus, and that's fine. They can push their case.
I've never voted on the Maori electoral roll. I've always voted on the general roll, and that's fine. I'm happy the way things are. I prefer the second option that you spoke about this morning, where we live in a democratic society and leave it the way it is. Obviously, it's just not radical enough, and they're just a bunch of radicals. That's all it is. We have been overtaken by a bunch of woke brown radicals. I'm sorry, it's just the way I see it, and I hate it.
Daryl, you identify yourself as Māori. Do you know what percentage of your bloodline is Māori, and how far back you go?
I'm not really familiar. I'm not familiar with my family tree and all that sort of stuff. But no, I wouldn't be. I'm not a full Maori, but I'm probably no more Maori than. Well, they're probably no more Maori than what I am. Those that are passing these laws.
Of course not, because as has been pointed out, I don't believe, and I'll stand to be absolutely corrected here, I don't believe there are any full 100% Māori left in New Zealand.
No, because as coming down through the centuries, everyone's intermarried and changed. Your bloodline is like thinned out, but you'll still carry a certain amount of bloodline.
Yeah, well, that's fine. That's fine. But
you can't. Yeah.
But should that be your dominant ethnicity? and if you want to class it as your dominant ethnicity, that's absolutely fine. But then I talk about this woman, Claire Charters, who's the chair of, or the lead author of this report. From the biographies and interviews with her, she is, like I say, at most 25% of Māori descent.
Yeah, I could be about that too. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to run on my colour or ethnicity. I run on what is best for this country.
Let's talk to Lee in Christchurch. Hi, Lee.
Hi, Peter. How's it going? This is Lee Williams across the Rubicon.
The Lee Williams. You're quite famous, aren't you?
Apparently.
Yeah, I've heard of you. Never met you. Yeah.
No, we should meet sometime. Listen, 5 weeks ago, I was completely cancelled by the Finalists of New Zealand. You know this.
I know about you. How's your bank account, by the way? How's your relationship with Westpac? I heard about that yesterday too.
They cancelled that Westpac, and I've managed to open another bank account. I won't tell you where, but I'm hoping that they're not going to interfere with that. But they've lost me my job. They cancelled my bank account. They've made me into the face of white supremacy in New Zealand. And for what? The reason they did that is because I made a satire video of Reverend Waititi of when he did the haka in Parliament, and Debbie Nariwa-Paka called Judith Collins, Judith Colonizer. And in that satire video, I mentioned He PuaPua and what it was all about, and I've made videos about He PuaPua. And I've even made a video this morning on Telegram, across Rubicon 123, if anybody wants to have a look. Now, this He PuaPua is going to rip New Zealand apart. 16% of the population of the vast majority, 16% of the vast majority of New Zealand, the vast majority of Maori are European, and they're going to get 50% of the power.
And that's true.
Now these people.
Well, we don't know yet, Lee. We don't know what's going to happen. What Willie Jackson's going to lay out this afternoon. Yeah, I know, but we don't know how far they're going to go with it, Lee. We don't know whether or not they're going to be adopting it. So let's cut him a bit of slack until he makes his announcement, all right?
Well, I think Willie Jackson, he's attacked me as well because he wrote an article about 6 weeks, maybe 2 months ago in the New Zealand Herald. I've been getting attacked from all sides, and you know what? No one has come to me for any opinion. No press have come to me and asked me what my thinking was. I even went to Stuff News last week in Christchurch, and I wanted to speak to the editor, and her name was Kamala
Heyman, yes? Kamala Heyman, yes.
Kamala Heyman. And she was upstairs, but she wouldn't come down to speak to me. And she spoke to me on the phone instead. She was upstairs and I was downstairs. So we spoke on the phone. I said, can you do an interview with me so I can give my side of the story? And she said to me, "You've got no chance," she said to me. "No chance. They've destroyed my life. I've lost my house. I've lost my marriage. I've lost my job. I've been completely debanked. And now I'm the face of white supremacy in New Zealand. I'm walking along Sumner Esplanade right now, and I'm looking over my shoulder. I've got a target on my back. For what? For telling the truth of what is happening in New Zealand."
Well, Lee, let me say, I don't know whether or not you're telling the truth, but what you have done is express an opinion. And from what I've seen, you have not incited any violence,
Never.
Have you not?
Never.
You have not incited. You have not incited action, so you have expressed an opinion, albeit a very strong one, and a very well expressed and strongly expressed one, which I'd have to say, Lee, that maybe a lot of people disagree with, and that's obviously the case, and that's why you have suffered the fate that you have. Having said that, as far as I'm concerned, Lee, you are entitled to say it, and that's why we've obviously allowed you on this radio station this morning.
We still live in a free country, and I'm expressing my freedom as it is, but it's a freedom that's fast been eroded. What they've done to me is what they're going to do to anybody else, and it's because I spoke about He Pua, and I took the piss, and I did take the piss, and I don't mind saying it, of Reverend Waititi, because he's comedy gold, to be fair, to take the piss out, but now they're out of bounds. these extremists, and I will call them extremists, right at the very top of the Maori tree, are out of bounds for satire. And they've destroyed my life for that. So what kind of country are we going to... And they've only got 16% of power now. What happens when they get 50%?
All right. Lee, I thank you for phoning in. It was completely unsolicited. Nice to hear from you. A controversial man and a man who has attracted a lot of attention for, yes, they are extremist views, but they're not illegal views. This is a country we thought where free speech should be tolerated.